Today, we're diving into one of the most famous, most audacious heists in modern history, the Great Train Robbery, a crime so brilliantly planned you won't believe it was almost completely undone by a single throwaway sentence. So let's set the scene. It's August 8th, 1963. Imagine a Royal Mail train hurtling through the dark English countryside on its way from Glasgow to London. The driver, a guy named Jack Mills, is at the controls when something just feels wrong. A red signal at a place called Sears Crossing. Now, this train never, ever stops here. He slams on the brakes and the whole thing screeches to a halt in the dead silence of the night. But trust me, that quiet is not going to last.
You see, on board that train, tucked away in a special carriage, was a mountain of cash. And I mean a mountain. In today's money, it was worth an incredible £67 million. This wasn't just any old mail train. It was basically a bank on wheels. And a gang of thieves knew exactly what was inside.
And that brings us to the big question, right? How in the world did a gang of more than a dozen criminals manage to pull off the heist of the century, supposedly without even using guns, only to have it all fall apart because of one tiny, fatal flaw? Well, let's get into it. Okay, so the train has stopped. The phone lines alongside the track, they've been cut. The driver and his co-pilot are completely alone and isolated. And then, out of the darkness, figures begin to emerge. The heist is on. But to really get how they pulled this off, we have to rewind a bit, because this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. No, this was the result of months and months of careful planning, and it was all built on a foundation of some very, very good inside information. The whole operation was the brainchild of a man named Bruce Reynolds, a pretty well-known figure in the London underworld. He basically assembled a criminal supergroup, a crew of more than 15 specialists, each with their own job. The funny thing was, none of them actually knew how to rob a train. So, what do? They bring in another gang that did, the South Coast Raiders. Now, their target wasn't the whole train. Oh no, they were after one very specific part of it, the high-value packages carriage, or the HVP. Think of this as the train's treasure chest. It was the second carriage, right behind the engine, and it's where the Royal Mail moved massive amounts of cash around the country. And this is where their inside man becomes so important. This anonymous source, someone deep inside the Royal Mail, gave them two golden nuggets of information. The first tip, because it was right after a big bank holiday weekend, the train wasn't carrying its usual load of around 300,000 pounds. Nope, on this particular night, it was carrying almost 10 times. And then came the second tip, the one that made this a complete once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The normal HPV carriages had just been upgraded with new security alarms. But, and you can't make this up, on this exact night, that secure carriage was out of service for repairs. So they were using an old reserve carriage instead, one with absolutely no security system at all. It was literally the perfect storm. So let's go back to the night of the robbery. The gang has this perfect intelligence, they're ready to go, and they have a plan that they have timed down to the very last minute. At 3 in the morning, they rig the signal light, just covering the green light with a glove and using a battery to power up the red one. The train stops, they swarm the engine. The driver, Jack Mills, puts up a fight, and he gets hit over the head with an iron bar for his trouble. They uncouple the engine and the first two carriages, and they force the injured Mills to drive them about 1 kilometer down the tracks to a spot called Bridego Bridge. That's where their getaway truck is waiting. They storm the HVP car, overpower the staff, and form a human chain, passing 120 mailbags, weighing 2.5 tons, into the back of their truck. It was an absolutely stunning success. They had the money, they were ready to disappear into the night. But as they were leaving, one of the robbers turned to the captured train staff and gave them a warning, a threat. And this one little sentence, well, it would turn out to be the single biggest mistake they made all night. So the gang makes their escape. They get to their hideout, a farmhouse about 43 kilometers away, and they start listening to the police radio to see what's happening. And how do they celebrate? By playing a game of Monopoly using the actual stolen cash. Yeah. But that celebration was about to be cut very, very short. So remember that 30-minute warning? Here's how it came back to bite them. As soon as the police were alerted, they heard about that threat. A quick bit of math told them the gang had to be hiding out somewhere within a 50-kilometer radius of the crime scene. All of a sudden, that huge search area got a whole lot smaller. The net was closing in way faster than the robbers ever expected. Panic starts to set in. The original plan was to lie low at the farmhouse until Sunday, but with the police closing in, they decided they had to get out of there by Friday. They went into overdrive, wiping down the entire farmhouse to get rid of fingerprints, dividing up the cash, about 150,000 pounds a man, and they paid someone to burn the whole place to the ground after they left, to destroy any evidence they might have missed. Except, the guy they paid to burn the farm, he just took the money and ran, never lit a single match. So when a neighbor called in a tip about suspicious activity, the police raided a completely untouched farmhouse. The gang had been so careful, wiping everything down, but they forgot one thing: the Monopoly set. And all over that game board and the pieces, they had left their fingerprints. Now, because these guys were all career criminals, their fingerprints were already on file at Scotland Yard. It was the breakthrough the police were desperate for. The prints were a direct match. Suddenly, the authorities had names, they had faces. The case was blown wide open, and the net closed in for good. What followed was a massive media sensation. The arrests, the trials, everything. But the true legacy of the Great Train Robbery is really complicated. It's part criminal folklore, part legend, and part very real human tragedy. So what happened to everyone? Well, of the 16 gang members, 14 were eventually caught. They were sentenced to an unbelievable 30 years in prison. The money? The vast majority of it just vanished. It was never, ever recovered. But the real price, the real human cost, was paid by the train driver. Jack Mills, the man who was attacked with that iron bar, he never truly recovered. Not from his head injuries, and not from the psychological trauma of it all. He couldn't go back to work, and he died just 7 years later. A direct victim of a crime that people sometimes call non-violent. And that leaves us with one final haunting question. Remember that insider, the man who gave them the 2 crucial tips that made the whole thing possible? He was never identified. The gang called him the Ulsterman. His true identity remains the very last secret of the Great Train Robbery, a complete mystery, even to this day.